Hey, welcome to our sneak preview and first real class of Advanced Transits, Panchanga and Muhurtha. I'm Barry Rosen. Many of you know me from my newsletter and from my columns on Facebook, and I've been teaching Vedic astrology classes every Saturday since 2017. So I have kind of a huge repertoire of stuff on my website. Today's topic is an introduction to this new class. I'm calling it Advanced Transits, Panchanga, and Muhurtha. And all three of those go together. The first part of the, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but uh, this is my contact information, and I'm going to give you my other email because this I'm having some trouble getting emails from my main email address. I have a bunch of Facebook sites, and this is my contact information. Many of you have it, and I do see texts on Facebook occasionally. Today, we'll have a real first lesson. I don't like just giving introductions. I actually like giving material, that people can learn from. So we'll have a lot of practical material today on uh, on Panchanga mainly, more than anything, in the 5 aspects of Panchanga. Um, uh, my classes generally run 2 hours. The next class is on April 12th. So it gives people time to sign up. Um, and so this is plus that'll get us through the Pisces stellium with all those planets together. So it's we'll start. Hopefully things will calm down by second week of April. Although it may even take a little bit more time than that, but we'll start on April 12th. Again, my office hours. I often, because Vedic astrology is part of the priestly position, I will actually start with some Vedic chanting. This is my book, by the way, if you don't know it from Amazon. Okay, so we'll start with some Vedic chanting. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapati Namaha, Om Ganapati Namaha, Om Ganapati Namaha, Vakritunda Mahakaya, Suryakoti Samaprapa, Nirvigam Kurame Deva, Sarvakarisha Sarvada, Jnanamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Panchamulam Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Kripa, Om Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrichoma Amritam Gamaya, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvina Vatitamastu Ma Vivishai Vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aditya Samaye Mangalai Buddhaya Cha Guru Shukra Shani Vishta Rahave Ketave Namaha. Okay, so I want to get into the first class, and I put together copious PowerPoints, and when you take the classes, you get the PowerPoints, and they have copious notes on them. And let me tell you a little bit about, and I want to acknowledge Camilla Sutton, Misty Larson, and another lady in Eastern Europe for helping me put together a lot of the information in this course. So Panchanga is one of the most important things in Vedic astrology. It's usually the thing that you're supposed to learn first, and that's looking at lunar days, half lunar days, transits of the moon through nakshatras, the understanding days of the week, understanding even the rulers of the hour, and all this was very important in ancient times because they were more interested in seeing what was going on a specific day for timing Vedic ceremonies, for offering remedies, and for also, creating opportunities for people with difficult charts. So the nature of Muhurtha is the most fascinating thing in Vedic astrology because it's extremely creative. It allows us to kind of bypass karma by creating a new situation, a new chart. So basically, let's say you have a difficult chart for being in business or having your own business now, but you really have a strong desire for that. So if you create a new chart at an auspicious time that has all kinds of good aspects and relationships for creating a new business, then what can happen is you can bypass the karma of your natal chart because you're creating a new chart, you're creating a new birth for your new business. So that's what, to me, Vedic astrology is. And Muhurtha is just one of the most important things Vedic astrology. About a third of the course will be on actually rules of Muhurtha and creating special Muhurthas for things. I mean, the Vedic literature on Muhurtha is extremely vast, but most of it is not relevant. I mean, most of us don't want to know when to plant our crops, or there's all these Muhurthas rules for new babies and rituals that you do for new babies and things like that. So the ones most commonly used, that I end up using today are around timing marriage, opening a business, purchasing a home, entering a new home, maybe timing a surgery. Those are the ones that people ask me about the most, and practically those are the ones that we'll know about. But we will learn there's all these principles of Muhurtha. A large part of the class is going to be focused on, first of all, we have to understand transits really well. And I have a basic transit course, which you can pick up for $197 if you haven't taken it. And I'll put it on sale on my website, and I'll send you a link for it. It's a good class, but we don't need to review all of that. We need to learn special things in this course on Muhurtha. So what the first, when people were wondering what the advanced transit part of my class is, and the first part is what I call creating yearly calendars. I'll give you Panchangas, 50-year, 25-year Panchangas, and you have to learn how to kind of use them and create a calendar for the whole year, because like when people come to you, you have to know, well, let's say June and July this year has some of the better astrological transits this year. And so if you're trying to create Muhurtha, you say, well, let's wait until June because, we have a lot of planets that have been in trouble, out of trouble then. So you have to really, the most important part of planning is you have to have an idea of what is going on for the whole year. Now, this is useful for planning your own life. For example, I needed to plan a vacation this year, and I planned it for late June. It works out with my life, but it also has some of the better astrology in it. So this, understanding a whole year's worth of transits is useful for kind of planning. So actually, we'll teach you some advanced tricks on kind of planning, looking at the transits of the whole year. And then you also have to understand, you can see complicated events like Mars and Ketu are conjunct the last couple weeks of July. So that's kind of you note that on your calendar. It's kind of like a danger area. Or obviously we'll be looking at the Pisces stellium on, March 28th, when we have 6 planets in Pisces. And, so you kind of want to have an idea of what's going on for the year, because it also, helps you kind of plan. One of the things I kind of realized, I haven't changed my website yet, but, understanding moon transits and moon signs and moon aspects are probably the most important, useful aspect for Muhurtha, because the moon is always the moon moves through one nakshatra every day. It's the most important part of a Muhurtha, and so we really should spend extra time understanding the moon in each sign, the moon when there are aspects to the moon, when how the moon transits kind of really impact Muhurtha. One of the things that happens is it's almost really difficult to get a perfect moon. You with these rules of Muhurtha, you want them in certain nakshatras, you want them unaspected. It's almost like sometimes there's 2 or 3 days a month that may work, and then you get a Jupiter aspect or something like that. So it's good to kind of understand the general rules for Muhurtha are the moon should be unaspected. Now that's very hard to get in reality. So, what do? Can you live with the moon-Venus conjunction? Can you live with the moon-Venus opposition? We need to understand that a little bit. And then I think it's important to understand, I think, cluster transits. The Sun, Mercury, and Venus kind of move together pretty closely all year round, and they stay pretty close to each other just because they're always kind of close to each other. And I think, kind of charting those and understanding them is important. And then even being able to decode cluster yogas is important. So that's kind of an advanced thing. In generally, planets don't like to be clustered. They don't but once in a while you get these amazing yogas that happen, and you should not fear them, but you have to understand clusters of planets. And so that's what I would call an advanced transit thing that we'll talk about. The second part of the course is going to go into the Panchanga, and those are the 5 planets, components of Panchanga. Panchanga means 5 limbs, and it refers to the Tithi actually it's pronounced, which means lunar day, the solar day, which is called Dina or Vara sometimes, the half lunar day, which is every lunar day is divided into 6 hours, and that's called Karna, and those are important in business. Nakshatras, we've had 2 courses on nakshatras, so we'll have 1 lesson on nakshatras and their relevance to Muhurtha. And then we have Nitya yogas, which are the relationship between the sun and the moon, and those are very important. We'll go over some of these Panchanga components today to give you an overview. And working with them daily kind of allows you to understand the subtle influences of transits. Now, the other thing is with Muhurtha, there's in part 3 of the course, there's just a lot of rules, and teaching rules gets kind of laborious, but we'll actually try to do some case studies and give you some practice in trying to create Muhurthas. But in some ways, Muhurtha is one of the more difficult things to do in Vedic astrology because things are never perfect. So when you learn all the rules, you find it nearly impossible to bypass the rules. So then you have to learn the rules that are exceptions that help you choose auspicious times. So like if you put sun in the 11th house, or that kind of is one of these kind of rules that helps bypass. And sometimes you can use there's 4 or 5 free Muhurtha days a year, like Akshaya Tritiya, when the sun and the moon are exalted, and that's happening at the end of April. And sometimes you can plan auspicious things on those days because you don't have, I call them get out of jail free days, because you can, pretty much use any day, although I usually teach people to kind of still pick the best ascendant on those days. So there are things like that. And so we have to also learn, and I didn't put it on one of the things that we're going to have to learn are the Vedic months. And that's something that's not taught anymore either. The lunar calendar is different than the solar calendar, and the lunar calendar, that has leap years, and they add an extra month every so many years. And we have to kind of, it turns out you have to understand the lunar months, because some months are considered auspicious for weddings. There's only 5 of them really. And some months are, you should avoid doing everything. So, it's important to understand the Vedic months. Again, this stuff isn't taught very much, and I think it's important for it to be learned. So that's kind of an overview. So again, our next live class is April 12th. There's 16 classes, so we'll be ending about the first week of August. There will be 2 weeks off, the last week of June and the first week of July, because it's my vacation time with my wife. So we will meet every Saturday at 11:30. All the classes are recorded and go into the cloud, and you can always replay them, and then you can even download them to your hard drive so you permanently have them. Okay, so that's kind of an overview. So again, I just talked to you a little bit about advanced transits, so I don't need to repeat that, but I think we're going to focus. Originally, I was going to repeat some of actually the truth of the matter is understanding Jupiter and Saturn transits and Rahu transits don't mean a whole lot for Muhurtha, because they don't happen that often, and you obviously need to be aware of them, but they're kind of like big things that last a long time. So that's why I thought, yeah, we need to focus on the small planets, because those are the ones that are changing the most. I don't know if we focused enough on them before, so that's new material for people who have studied with me. Okay. So I just in general, transits are a great way to understand natal charts. Is when you experience aspects and transits and signs and nakshatras, we can observe what it means for someone's natal chart. So I learned a lot of Vedic astrology by watching transits every day for about 35 years, and you kind of see how things manifest and what are good days and what are bad days. And for anybody who wants to really learn Vedic astrology, you need to kind of pick up your calendar and start seeing what happens and how it impacts your chart. And it's quite fascinating to know. I mean, what's coming up, this is our cluster bomb next week. I put it for March 29th. I'm hoping to write an article on it today. But this doesn't happen very often. Obviously, we do get 6 planets in the sign. If we include Neptune, we've got 7 planets together on for a couple of days there. Saturn is just going into Pisces on the 29th. So to get Saturn in there, we have to look at this cluster on the 29th and the moon there. So for about a day there, we have next Saturday we have 7 planets together, and one of the last times this happened, it wasn't even exactly this was in 1615. Doesn't, in the sign of Pisces. Now we do get clusters. We had the Capricorn cluster in 2020, which heralded the pandemic. If we study these kind of clusters, and this is also happening on the Vedic New Year. This is the Vedic New Year chart, which is a whole nother unusual event. It kind of sets up just a very complicated year, and generally it just usually leads to kind of major events. Now it turns out the closest analog we have to having all these planets and Pisces together was in 1615, and actually the first 3 months after that, there were a lot of good things that happened. There were a lot of treaties that happened and things like that. One of the things that a lot of people are telling you to go into the bomb shelters because of this event. There are a couple things that I think that are positive. One, the dispositor, which is Jupiter, is exalted in the Navamsha chart. It's in Cancer Navamsha. So I think that actually is holding it up, and also the exalted Venus, even though it gets afflicted by Rahu and it's actually more powerful retrograde. I think it also has kind of a positive effect, and that's why the last time we had this cluster, I don't even call it a cluster bomb, in Pisces was in 1615. If you remember, I think around April 28th, 29th. It wasn't exact because Mercury started going into Aries, but I think you could, it was equivalent. In general, we know this is going to be kind of a crazy year, and we're probably going to have a lot of, things, major water events and storms and things like that. But, obviously, I always tell people don't go on a picnic during when there's a tornado watch out. And so, I think the next 2 or 3 weeks, you just have to kind of not plan important things. Obviously, we wouldn't plan a wedding or start a new business during this time. It's just, there might be a way to get all these planets, in the right rising sign to be beneficial, but obviously there's lots of problems with this chart. And one way to kind of just break this down, you just have to look at the individual components of it. Even though Mercury is retrograde and Venus are retrograde, again, benefics are stronger when they're retrograde. And both of them are far enough away from the sun. And the rule is when Mercury and Venus are retrograde, they're not combust. So it's called, Western astrologers understand that they're on the other side of the sun. So they're not a problem. The combustion is not a problem. What's starting to be a problem in April is the Saturn Rahu conjunction. And that, goes, within 3 degrees, that goes at least a month or so. And that tends to create paranoia and anxiety. And so you have to be aware that if you're feeling a lot of paranoia and anxiety over the next month, then you have to understand it will pass. This Rahu will get into Aquarius in May, and they'll be, past 3 degrees of each other sometime late in April. But what's also interesting is Saturn and Neptune, which are moving toward each other. And in mundane astrology, if you study that cycle, which is 36 to 37 years, it tends to create major geopolitical reorganization. And I wrote about this in January, and that's what we have happening. U.S. is trying to create détente with Russia. NATO is, the U.S. kind of wants to leave NATO. NATO is trying to Europe is trying to reorganize. So we can expect, in 1989, the last time we had a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Sagittarius, we had the fall of the Berlin Wall at the exact conjunction. We had the fall of the Soviet Union bloc. It took a couple of years. So, we can't have, these larger mundane transits do create geopolitical reorganization. And, one of the, if I'm positive, it's because Venus is exalted still, even though it's kind of afflicted, and Jupiter is exalted in the Navamsha. So and that's a dispositor. So I've watched these people get on YouTube for, and write about it for years. Oh, the Mayan calendar's ending, we're doomed. Or if you remember 1999, the end of Y2K, oh, we're doomed. I go back to 1987, there's a big cluster of planets, oh, we're doomed. I don't, people tend to fall into fear, and I think it's interesting. I expect lots of major geopolitical events, it's been a fast and furious year, and one of the problems has also been Mars. Mars is out of bounds, which means, its declination is higher than normal, and what that tends to create is kind of moving at warp speed. Mars is on steroid, and that actually lists on April 1st. So that's, that's actually right around the end time of, this cluster. So that is going to kind of slow things. And then Mars is going to go into Cancer, which is, people yell, oh, debilitated, it's horrible, but the people don't realize about Mars and Cancer, it's like a declawed cat. It gets angry and it hisses, but it can't do anything. And when Mars first went into Cancer last October, I said, well, I'm not going to worry about Iran as much. Now, it's not like we don't have war going on. We just had a new launch of Hamas, and certainly the Sun Rahu conjunction. The Sun Rahu conjunction this week was not helping that. But I'm hopeful because actually I think Mars just doesn't have as much fighting energy, and I'm even hopeful that maybe we can get some peace with Russia and Ukraine. But anyway, that's this is kind of a side aspect. Everybody's going to want me to talk about this, so I thought I'd put it down. But and I'm still thinking about it a lot. But
Hey Barry, can I make one comment?
yeah.
I think also it's just, and you did say this, it's sort of all over like YouTube and everything else about this whole cluster in Pisces, yada yada. And it's, really fatalistic in terms of how it's being described. I think it's really important to note, as you initially said, that all of these planets get scattered in the divisional charts.
Yeah. So
we're all sort of, when I say we, I don't mean we as in here, just collectively there's just so much focus on what this means per your ascendant. But, I think sort of the beauty of Vedic astrology is understanding that these all get really scattered, and, there's a lot of diversity in what can happen when we look at all of the divisionals.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, we're not all going to be swallowed up by a giant tidal wave, and the planet's not going to explode in an atomic bomb. I mean, like I said, that's why I preface this by saying, Jupiter, the dispositor of Pisces, is strong, even though it's 3 houses away. It's not a great placement, but it's still in Cancer and Navamsha, so it wants to uphold Dharma. And Venus, I think this Venus exaltation is really saving things too. But anyway, that's my thought. But anyway, so if you study transits with me, if you take the Transit 1 class, you kind of learn all these subtle principles. I've been studying transits for 35 years, and we'll learn some advanced principles in this upcoming course. Okay. But when we study transits, it also helps us to understand our own emotions and the way the mind plays tricks on us. Like I say, we've got the Saturn Rahu conjunction coming in, in April. It tends to create a lot of excessive anxiety and paranoia, and you have to be aware of it. I mean, you just have to drink calming teas, and you have to do grounding exercises, and you have to just be aware that all the stuff you're making up in your mind is just probably not going to happen, including, the planet blowing up. Still, it's good to kind of, do long-term planning. You don't want to plan a picnic during a tornado watch. Okay, so we have a tornado watch at the end of the month. So let's just, not go overboard in starting a new business or going on a major trip. I'm coming back from a major trip. I have no choice, but that's the story. And the big thing I always want to teach people about transits is we don't want to become Chicken Little. I mean, I have a friend who's a good astrologer, and she was so afraid of what was happening in her chart, she refused to go out of the house. I mean, literally, and she just stopped. She had groceries delivered, and she just was so afraid of what was happening. I don't think we can live our life that way. I mean, and there are things that we can do to overcome that, but the purpose of astrology was never to strike fear into the hearts of us to make us immobile. So we have to get away from an astrology of fear. There are always positive things. And transits come in clusters, and it's important to understand them. I teach in my transit class, when you get a lot of 11th house transits, you know, again, the bigger planets usually move together, Sun, Mercury, Venus, you know, when they go through your 11th house, yeah, things, you know, you fulfill your desires, maybe more money comes, but then you know that the 12th house transits are coming and all the expenditures are coming and the unexpected losses. And if you don't save your extra money during the 11th house transits, you don't have it for the 12th house transits. So there are a lot of practical things to learn. 6th house transits, we have to learn more discipline around our health. 8th house transits, you know, yes, we get surprises and delays, but they can be wonderful times for personal growth and transformation. The other thing to know about transits that people don't pay enough attention to is that transits are only 20% of prediction, and dashas are 80%. So if you're in a good dasha, you're in a Jupiter period, and Jupiter is a good planet for you, and it's in your 9th house, you know, you're divinely predicted, you know, and there'll be some bumps from transits, but you know, it's the larger cycle that's the most important thing. I had planned on teaching my dasha class this year, and I decided, you know, I have a good version of it available for purchase, but you know, you do have to understand dashas really well first, because that's where timing really comes in. I mean, the transits are bumps. You know, since we're focusing on transits in this course because we need them for Muhurtha in a creative way. For the most part, I tell people, you know, people don't know how to filter out the noise of too many transits. For the most part, focus on the transits of the ascendant lord. So if you're Aries rising, you know, you need to watch Mars. If you're Taurus rising, you need to watch Venus, very basic. But you know, some of the other planets may not be as significant for you. The Dasha Lord is also the most important planet to watch because it's governing your period. If it gets really afflicted, it could mess up your dashas. There's, you know, many advanced principles that we could learn, and you know, that we will look at. But the important thing is also to get a spiritual perspective on challenges in our life. I mean, I'm not sure. When you came here, I'm not sure, you know, God promised you a picnic on the beach every day. You know, it's, you know, we're here to grow. There are bumps along the way on our journey, and how we maneuver through those bumps is important. You know, like I said, do we hide in our house, and or, you know, or do we take whatever challenges come our way and transform them to become a better person? And you know, they're inevitable. We're here. We came to work through karma, and we should embrace it. And the malefics even are good. They're all good planets. I know I was at a conference, and David Frawley's wife was talking about, yeah, we should never fear any of the planets, Saturn, Rahu. They're all good. I always tell people Saturn's the life coach. You know, he beats you up and he makes you, you know, and he makes you work hard, and then you win the race and you want to hug him. But it's, you know, Saturn's actually out to kind of also help us too, and we have to kind of keep that in perspective. You know, what are we not seeing in our life when we get difficult transits? I like to see you know, astrology kind of as a jnana technique. It helps us transcend the maya of the world, and if we can transcend, if we see what's going on in the planets, we know what's happening in our mind, what's impacting our intuition, and we can kind of what's going on in our emotional body, and we can kind of bypass it a little bit. Oh, that's going to last another week. I can live through it. I just need to do more meditation and yoga. I have to take my walks around the block. So there's always practical things to do. We don't need to go through this. Transits impact us more strongly when they hit the natal areas of our natal chart. So if you have a lot of planets at 0 to 3 degrees Pisces, you know, all those, and I have my sun there. You know, there could be a huge impact on your chart. At the same time, you know, it doesn't always have to be negative. It turns out like Saturn hitting your natal sun can actually elevate career. in the last 3 weeks, I was invited to speak at 3 astrology conferences as Saturn's approaching my natal sun. So you just, you can't always expect the worst in your life, and it's not always true. And that it's kind of a little astrology sometimes is dangerous. One of the things that we're not going to do in this course as much is look at the larger transits, and they're very, very important, and you can pick up the Transit 1 course for $197 and study it. But Rahu and Ketu are changing signs at the end of May. That's always significant. Saturn is just about to go into Pisces for 2.5 years on March 29th. We just showed you that chart. Jupiter is going to be changing into Gemini in May. It's important to know these and to know the retrogrades and things like that. And you have to map them out for the whole year. But for Muhurtha, which is really kind of a daily, monthly event, they're kind of background noise, the larger moves, but they're important to know. And Mercury retrograde is not bad for everybody. If you're ruled by Mercury, it makes your body stronger. It makes you, for other people, it makes you more intuitive. So it's there are a lot of advanced rules on transits, and people, you can study them in my Transit 1 course, and some of them will be advanced here in transit in this class also. Okay. So in generally my classes, I tend to lecture, and I will pause for questions at times, and I will take some questions at the end of this talk also. I tend to like Southern Indian style. We have people that like Northern. I do have some charts that I can put up both Southern and Northern on the same slide. I used Northern for 30 years, and I switched to Southern because I can see the Gemini aspects very easily, and I don't have to get crisscrossed. But there's a lot. I personally use Sri Jyoti Star. A lot of people have Parashara's Light, Jagannatha Horus free software. If you take the class, I will give you some Vedic ephemerises. The one that I have for 2026 through 2050 lists the names in Sanskrit. So you're going to have to learn the Sanskrit names of the planets and the signs, which you should know anyway. But it's hard to, I do have an English ephemeris that I bought, but it's no longer available. But I will give you an ephemeris for the next 25 years and this year, which can help you plot the stars. One of the things that I recommend, which I do, is I take a Western calendar. This is at the moment, this is the one that I use. I used to use Jim Maynard's, but it's no longer available. And I plot, the major events on a calendar, and that way, on any given day, I can look at them, so I know what, and I'll teach you how to do that in the next class. And I think it's the essence of really kind of getting aware of what's happening, and then seeing, and you can look at it in one glance. You can also just run your astrology program every day, but I think it's nice to pick up a calendar and look at it, and I'm going to encourage people to do that. And when you're trying to look at the next 5 months, you have to scroll through the software, and when you can throw through a calendar, it's a little bit easier. So I'm old-fashioned. I like paper ephemerises and calendars, and I encourage those techniques. Everybody wants to be electronic these days, but I'm old-fashioned. Okay, so I want to teach you the basics of Panchanga. Panchanga means 5 limbs, and one of the challenges with this course is that we have to memorize a lot of Sanskrit names because they're used in the ephemerises, they're used in the books. You just have to kind of memorize them. So Dina, which is sometimes also referred to as Vara, means solar day, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And there's an we're gonna have a whole lesson on solar days because you know, it's everything really. I mean, and I'll go over some of those points right now. Nakshatra changes one, is connected to our mental qualities. The moon goes one nakshatra every day. Understanding, we've had 2 classes on nakshatras, and we'll have a lesson reviewing nakshatras from Muhurtha. The tithis are the lunar days. We'll probably have 2 or 3 lessons on tithis. It's the emotional quality of the day, and lunar days are very important. Karanas, which are not really talked about very much, are the half lunar days, and they're important for business in the material world. And Nitya yogas are the relationship between the sun and the moon, and there's 27 of them, and they blend the solar and lunar energies, and they show the protections and blessings of the individual on certain days, and there's 27 of them. So you get all these kind of, every day you get a combination of these things, which is quite fascinating. Now, the 5 elements of the Panchanga, the 5 limbs of the Panchanga, are connected to the 5 elements. Jupiter's connected to the Nitya yogas, that's the space element. Knowledge of Nitya yoga gives us immunity from diseases through grace of Jupiter, and supports finances through the yogi point. So we'll study that again. Many of you haven't studied that with me. We'll look at the nakshatras, which are connected to the air element, which is Saturn. They deal with communication, thoughts, mentality, and prana, and how the mind fluctuates daily. So the moon going through various nakshatra triggers our mental state, understanding that it's important, and that you want to pick the right nakshatra for a Muhurtha. You know, there are nakshatras that are used to start war, and there are nakshatras that are used to start business or to get married on, and which, you know, you don't want to pick a nakshatra to get married on to start a war unless you want your marriage to be a war. The fire element is connected to the sun and to Dina, or the daily, the days of the week, and that gives us, it's about energy and daily activity, action. The sun is about action, right? The tithis are connected to Venus and to relationship of all things. And the water element, there's an emotional quality to the day in the tithi, and we'll be looking at those. And then the karanas are connected to Mercury and the earth element, and to business, how we create karma and what actions we can take in life. And there are 2 karanas every day, and most of the karanas are good. There's about a dozen of them that you want to kind of not watch out for. Now, it's also fascinating. One of the interesting things that we'll do in the course, which I've always wanted to do, is look at daily Panchanga and personality. This is kind of a hidden quality. If you run the Panchanga and you're doing a natal birth analysis, you can find out a lot of hidden things about the person that you just don't really see in the chart. And we'll learn, one of the things that we'll do in the chart to make it, in the class, to make it more interesting, is kind of learn and look at this, because I think it's actually quite fascinating. I'll just give you an example of my chart. So here's my Panchanga. I was born on a Tuesday. Mars is the day ruler. I was born on the 8th Tithi, which is ruled by Rahu, on the dark side, in the waning moon. The Karana, I was number 3, Balava. I'll talk about that in a minute. The yoga, the Nitya yoga, was number 16, which is a good one. It's called Siddhi. The nakshatra I was born for, the moon, is Jeshta. We've studied that before in the nakshatra class. And then, you know, we can look at, there's all kinds of information, but we're going to really kind of become masters of understanding this, because it's really, there's so many things that you can do with it. Hora is the ruler of the hour. I was born in a Mercury hour. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Here's my chart for those of you who haven't seen it before. I'm sorry, I've got the southern version. Scorpio rising, moon in the 1st house, Lord of the 9th in the 1st, Saturn in the 12th, Almacorica, kind of a very difficult placement. Venus and Saturn are in a Parivar yoga, so Saturn doesn't move because it's exalted, so Venus really goes into the 12th house in Libra, which gives me a lot of artistic talent that gets repressed. Mercury in the 4th, Sun in the 5th. The Sun's my strongest planet. Jupiter in the 8th with Ketu for past life as an astrologer and a Vedic priest. So that's kind of how all this came about. Okay. Now, if we analyze my Panchanga in detail, I was born on a Tuesday. I've got Mars in the 6th house in Aries. So it's generally a really good placement. It's a friend of mine has Mars in the 6th house in Aries, and he's Scorpio, and he's a medical doctor. Now, I almost started out in pre-med, but that exalted Saturn was too afraid to compete with all the pre-med students, and I dropped out. But I've always been involved in healing, 6th house, and service. Mars wants to defend the needy, pure of heart, can be practical and down to earth. We can see that I've got Mars and Virgo Navamsha. Virgo's an earth sign, so I have a strong business side to me, which is very kind of interesting. Mars is strong but afflicted by Saturn, so I can hold on to grudges or resentment. So that's the nature of Tuesday. The Karna, which is the half lunar day, is Balava. And Balava turns out to be ruled by the moon. We'll learn all the rulers of the Karnas. And it means stronger for a strong mind. We'll travel a lot and be successful and strong, clear thinkers and brave and loving and poetic. Now, those things are amazingly true about me. I do travel a lot. I do have an incredibly strong mind. I am brave and loving, and I'm a poet. And, that's right there in the Karna, isn't, and you might be able to pull it from the natal chart. But it's right there in the in the Karna, isn't it? Totally fascinating. Okay. The Nitya Yoga is number 16. I'm a Siddhi, which is called Siddhi, accomplished, attained, successful, divine being, pure and seer, aspiration for purity, natural philosopher and thinker, successful, expert in business, and multi-skilled. Now, those are all true of me. Now, I'm multi-skilled because I've got Jupiter in Gemini. You can see it there. I'm an expert in business, which is kind of a thing that you don't really see in my chart. And I am a kind of a philosophical thinker, and I am very a divine being in some senses. My moon's nakshatra is Jeshta, symbol of the earring gift of the king who mastered their lower nature and gained occult powers. Again, moon's in Scorpio. Again, I've been always attracted to the occult and 8th house things. And Jeshta is kind of moving from the material nakshatras into the spiritual nakshatras in Sagittarius, and it's ruled by Mercury. Anyway, this is a whole thing in itself. So to me, what's kind of fascinating, I mean, you might be able to pull all those things out of my chart if you really knew me well, but right away, by studying the Panchanga, you get incredibly deep things about my personality. And they're really not as obvious here. I mean, master of business, I don't know, I mean, Lord of the 10th and the 5th, connected to Jupiter. Yeah, you could make a case for that. But there's a lot of hidden things that come out, just very apparent in the Panchanga. So I think Panchanga is also very useful for studying personality, and that's one of the things that we'll study with it. Otherwise, the course can be a little bit too boring. Okay. So we went over this already. So one of the things that we have to kind of learn, and I used to teach this in financial astrology, is the daily strengths and weaknesses of the planets, because they tell us something about picking a good Muhurtha day, and they also tell us, what's going on that day. And, on a practical level, if you have to pick a day for a job interview, do you pick and they say, well, can you come Wednesday or Thursday? and your Jupiter is strong in your chart, and Jupiter is a good planet for you, and so you naturally say Thursday. But there are things like that that we teach in the. I'll teach you some of that today, but we also learn it in our other transit classes. But so the Nitya Yogas, if they're ones that we don't like to use. These are numbers 1, 6, and they cause emotional imbalances. So there's 27 of them, and so 3, 6, 8, 9 of the 27, a third of the Nitya Yogas are not considered good. So then, it's interesting to know. Lunar days, 1, 4, 9, 14, and 15 are generally more problematic. They're more emotionally volatile. And I notice, on Tithi 4, and Tithi 9 or something, the stock market's a little bit more emotional and things like that. We don't like to do Muhurthas when the sun is changing signs. So, and that represents the last 40 minutes when the sun's at 29:20 going into 0:40. So we have the sun just changed signs. We won't have that again until April 13th, 14th. Moonvote, of course, is a Western concept. I think only 1 degree is important. I mean, generally, we know that planets are kind of weak in the last degree. Saturn's at the last degree now, not really great. Moon, every couple days is at the last degree. And if you had to pick a chart, you try to avoid the last degree or the first degree of the moon. It's kind of a weak area. Planets, you don't like any planet really on the last degree. They're void of energy. Moon in the Gandanta, we know the area between the water signs and the fire signs is a very vulnerable and emotionally negative place. Pisces 27 to Aries 3, Cancer 27 to Leo 3, Scorpio 27 to Sag 3. So generally, we try to avoid a lot of planets in those areas. When we're doing Muhurtha, we try to avoid particularly the moon in those areas. It's particularly vulnerable. Once in a while, this year, for example, Mercury was going retrograde in the Gandanta in Scorpio, so it's going to spend a lot of time there. And that happens sometimes. Saturn sometimes has gone retrograde in the Gandanta, and it's just kind of a really hairy time. So it's good to be aware of it. Lata and Vithitra, which are things that most people don't know about. It's when the sun and the moon have the same absolute declination within 1 degree. I'll show you how to find that in the ephemeris. I find those days are volatile, and I watch the stock market, and inevitably they're just not good. So it's kind of interesting to know about them. Most people don't know about them. Vergodama planets are considered strong. I like to put them in Muhurthas if you can. They're good for, they show up really well in Jaimini astrology as being very important for creating and fulfilling desires and life purpose. Retrograde planets are not all bad, of course. They're particularly powerful when they're stationary. John F. Kennedy was born during a stationary Mercury. Our Donald Trump has a stationary Jupiter in his chart. I have a stationary Jupiter in my 8th house. It tends to create very powerful energies. Retrograde benefics actually do more good. People worry about retrogrades, but is it a benefic? Again, retrograde Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus can be good, and most people, hide in the house. You can't hide from retrogrades. They have. We talk about them in our Transit 1 class. You don't always have to avoid them in Muhurthas. Sometimes you do, but they're not. Sometimes they're stronger. I mean, there are problems with them, but what happens is, Jupiter's retrograded 4 months a year, Saturn's retrograded maybe 4 or 5 months a year. And, what do? You just, you can't always avoid them. So you have to be aware of their natures. Combustion is one of the more difficult things in Vedic astrology. Planets too close to the sun lose strength. So you don't, like last year, Venus was combust for a couple months, and the rules of Muhurtha say don't schedule a marriage during combustion. It makes sense, Venus combustion. And so it was a bear because the Venus didn't come out of combustion last year until June 9th or something, July 9th or something, just for a few days. It was really hard finding a wedding for this one lady. But you have to be aware of that. Combustion is really difficult. Retrograde combustion of Venus and Mercury don't mean anything. Velocity, sometimes planets lose strength if they go too fast. This year, Jupiter in Gemini is going to speed through Gemini. It goes in there on May 20th or so, and it leaves in October. So it's going quite fast, and it's not really great when a planet's going too fast, it loses energy. So it's not really great transit of Jupiter this year, but you can't avoid it. And then it's just one of those problems. And then planetary wars usually don't want to schedule Muhurthas during planetary wars. They're just, it's very complex energies. But once in a while, sometimes things like that. Okay, let's look at day of the week. I'm going to I'm going to take a break here and open up the mics for questions. I know my students can know how they're under the panelist tab. They know how to get their mics on. If you're an attendee, you have to find the audio system and click on your orange mic. But I'm going to unmute everybody. So if you can find your mic, you can also type a question into chat, although it's usually hard for me to see those, but I will look for them now. Okay, any questions so far in anything? Again, did somebody get their mic up? Okay.
Oh, hi, Barry. It's Alice.
Oh, hi, Alice. Oh, great.
I came in through another link, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of looked at my chart, and my sun is at a 2946, and I remember you said 2920 is when it's in transit. So it just indicates I have a very weak sun, right?
It can indicate a weak sun. Again, sometimes there are hidden strengths in it. It's the Atmacorica. Usually the planets that are that high in degrees are the Atmacorica. So you have lessons around father and, work and ruler of your 10th, the second house family and things like that. So, we always have to look at things. And generally,
I was thinking because my dad, when he had me, he was already in his mid 60s, so he was already old. And so when he died, he was like 96, and I was like 32, I think, or something like that.
Oh wow, he still lived that long. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I was wondering too if that had anything to do with it, because my dad wasn't, he married a young bride, but he just had me very late in life. So
Right.
I was that because I had kind of a good relationship with him, so I don't see a problem with him. But he was, yeah.
Good question. So one of the things, whenever we look at anything in Vedic astrology, we look at like 5 things. So sun is Karaka for father, but we'd also look at the 9th house. We'd also look at the 9th house in the D12 chart. We would look at the 9th from the 9th house. So whenever you're evaluating like a parent or anything, you're supposed to look about 5 things. And so the Karaka being on the edge is not enough to kind of say that you had a horrible father,
Yeah.
Didn't. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks.
Great. Any other quick questions? I'm just taking a break from talking. Okay, I'm going to mute you all again. Oh, geez. Okay, so let's look a little bit at the importance of days of the week and how we can use them in our chart. Again, this, whether you're taking my class or not, I just want to make this lesson useful, so it's not just a promo preview. It's it's got knowledge in it. So days of the week are important. Sundays are a good day for fixed and stable projects. Monday is a movable day, so good for travel or work. Tuesday is obviously ruled by Mars, so it's aggressive and a day for cruel acts. And surgeries are scheduled on Tuesdays because Mars governs surgery and it governs doctors often. So you actually schedule surgeries on Tuesday because Mars is, especially if Mars is happy, you want Mars happy to schedule surgery. Wednesday is good for education, Karka for Mercury. Jupiter is good for higher education and spiritual knowledge. It's good for all things spiritual teaching. Ideally, I should be teaching this class on a Thursday, but on a practical level, people can't take off. I'm too tired on Thursday night, and people, are working and they don't take off of work for my classes, so we do them on Saturdays. Fridays is gentle and friendly. Saturn's volatile. Those are general qualities, but more specifically, Sunday is good for starting long-term activities, but not considered good for marriage. You know how many people get married on Sundays because it's like, oh, we can get to church and Aunt Betty can come from out of town, and it's very funny because Sunday is a church day, so it's good for spiritual weddings, but it's not considered a good day for marriage. We usually should get married on a Friday or a Thursday, and if you had to, Monday or Wednesday could work, but never Tuesday, Sunday, or Saturday. Monday is good for all activities, but not travel. Tuesday is good for starting a conflict. That might be a legal battle, but not for signing contracts or marriage. Wednesday is good for writing and knowledge, and weddings can work on Wednesday. Thursday is good for all things Vedic studies, spiritual things, Jupiter's day. Friday is good for all things having fun and dating. Saturday is good for chores and errands and cleaning work. So in general, I tell people, particularly if Jupiter and Venus are strong in transit, and you have to pick a day. Usually you try to pick Thursday and Friday because they're the two strongest benefics, and unless they're horribly afflicted in transit, or they're really horribly bad planets for you, then it's, if you have to pick a day of the week, do Thursday and Friday for like job interviews or things like that. You all know you have to memorize the rulers of the week. It's pretty obvious. The one that's hard to remember, Mercury Day. In Italian, Mercoli Day is the word for Wednesday. Mercoli Day, so it's got the word Mercury in it. Thor's Day, Thursday comes from Thor's Day, Scandinavian Thor's the equivalent of Jupiter. Friday comes from Freitag, which is the Venus, equivalent of Venus in Norse culture, I believe. Saturday has Saturn in it. It's easy to remember, but those you should be able to memorize those easily. And again, remember Mercoli Day for Mercury, Thor's Day for Jupiter, and Freitag for Venus. Okay. So utilizing the ruler of the day. And most people do these things anyway. Do spiritual groups on Sundays. I mean, you go to church, or you have your spiritual satsangs, or you do your meditation groups. Good day for that. Do chores and cleaning on Saturdays. Saturn likes to work. I work every Saturday because Saturn is a work day, and I have an exalted Saturn, and I always get a lot done. And Saturn, is a day to clean the house and fix the car and run errands. People do that naturally, but sometimes some people don't. Friday is a day for dating, right? You have to have fun on Friday. If you don't have fun on Friday, you're not honoring Venus. Even if you're tired, make sure you go get together with a friend, go to a restaurant, go to a concert. Thursday is a good day for studying the Vedas or astrology. Do your astrology homework on Thursday. Get a lot of support for it. Tuesday is a good day for athletics. It's Mars Day, right? Mars is good for competition. Go to the gym. Monday is good for cooking. Moon is one of the signifiers for cooking and food. Maybe a good day to go shopping and cook an extra good meal. And so the thing you always want to look at is the ruler of the day strong and unafflicted in transit. So, for example, Mercury is pretty afflicted these days because it's in Pisces and it's retrograde and it's moving toward conjunction with Saturn and Rahu. So Wednesdays for another month or until Mercury gets into Aries and away from all those early degrees is just kind of tough. And I had you have to kind of do special Vedic mantras for Mercury on Wednesdays if you're going to have your mind work. But you have to kind of be aware of what's happening in transit. If the planet is weak in transit, the day of the week may be hard. So that's an important rule. In general, look at the Karka value. Monday's a good day for nurturing, mothering, cooking. Tuesday for fighting your battles. Athletics. Wednesday for writing and studying. Thursday for higher wisdom, spiritual knowledge. Friday being in relationship, having fun. Saturday, these are kind of obvious things. Most people do them, but some people don't. Try cleaning your house on a Sunday because you didn't do it on Saturday, and it's just like pulling teeth. You just kind of hate it. On Saturday it's easier. The Saturn energy is there. It wants you to work hard and get that cleaning done, but try to do it on a Friday when you're supposed to be having fun. It's just like, it's just kind of interesting. So the general rule is if the ruler of the planet of the day is afflicted in transit, it will spoil the day to some degree. Like I said, I gave the example of Mercury. To me, Mercury is the most difficult planet at the moment. I can live with Sun in Pisces. I can live, but the other thing is if the planet's strong in your natal chart, you won't notice a problem if it's weak in transit. So this is really interesting, and I teach this in the class. So if look at the strongest planets in your chart and look at the weakest planets in your chart. Now, we'll go back to my chart. Okay, so the Sun is one of my strongest planets because it's Lord of the 10th and the 5th. It's in a friend sign. There's some problems with it, but for the most part, it's pretty happy. The Moon is my weakest planet because it's in Scorpio. It's hemmed in by Saturn and Rahu. And Venus is actually problematic. It's actually one of my weaker planets, even though it goes into Libra with the party of art and yoga. It's conjunct Saturn. It's in the 12th house. Mercury is actually very strong in my chart because it's got a Jupiter aspect in it, even though it's a little overactive in the 4th house. Saturn's very strong, exalted, and Mars is very strong in Aries. So how this manifests for me, and this is what I've learned watching my days, is Monday is my most difficult day of the week, and it really reflects my debilitated moon hemmed in. And so I just stopped scheduling important things on Monday. Monday has become my day off, and I run errands and I go to the doctor and I have to do some work, but I don't schedule readings. I don't schedule anything important because it's just, it doesn't happen. If I schedule important projects, you know, on Monday, it's just pulling teeth to get them done. So that's how I use it for my personal chart. Now, Tuesdays are, I always get a lot done on Tuesdays. My Mars is very strong. Wednesdays are strong. Thursdays are strong. I have a strong Jupiter. Even Fridays are a problem. For years, I've just struggled getting stuff done on Fridays, and I don't do readings on Fridays. It's connected to my 12th house. I tend to pay bills on Fridays. I am working in my astrology classes on Fridays, and that somehow makes me happy, and I always get them done. But I struggle with Fridays. And Saturdays, I have a Saturn's exalted, even though it's in the 12th. I tend to get a lot done, and I teach my classes, and it's my best day. So kind of interesting. And Sundays are always really good too. So I've kind of rearranged my life around the fact that Mondays and Fridays don't work for me, and the other days are fine. And by scheduling my life around that information, most of you probably know this. You probably know that, you know, certain days of the week are just don't work for you ever, and you know, but obviously don't schedule an important job interview or a big project on a day that isn't good for you. I mean, sometimes you have to do it, but you know, when you have choices, you can, you know, at least schedule things on your good days. Okay, so that's a little bit, we'll go into this more, but in the course, I just wanted to give you some knowledge about this. So let's look at tithis real quickly. The correct pronunciation is tithi, and meaning lunar day. And again, there's 12, a lunar day is 12 hours. And so it's the lunar days and solar days are not quite equal. And so, you know, a lunar month has 30 tithis in it. We know the solar calendar has 30 or 31, and so that this, you know, you get a big difference between the solar and the lunar calendar. The Jewish calendar and the Hindu calendars are both lunar calendars, and I can't remember the exact. We'll look it up, but like in the Jewish calendar, they add a leap month every five times in 19 years to stay in touch with the solar calendar. I believe it's something like that. I have to look it up exactly. Some years you get a leap month in the Vedic calendar, and you have to be aware of it because, and they just add it in a certain way, and there's 2 of them, and I'll teach you the rules for that. I don't know it offhand. I think last year we had was a leap year in the Vedic calendar. The lunar year is 48 weeks, so that's why you have to add a month every so many years. Lunar month is called connected to Shukla Paksha, which is the bright half of the moon, the waxing moon, and then the waning moon, which is called Krishna Paksha, is 15 tithis also. And you know, in generally we like the waxing moon. It feels better. It turns out the waning moon, and generally a lot of muhurtas are better during waxing moons. But waning moons are good for spiritual knowledge and spiritual activity. So there may be special muhurtas for spiritual initiations that will work during a waning moon. But those are the things that we're not going to learn because most of you don't time when to put an earring in a baby's ear. You know, and that's something that's in the Vedas, and that was important. They had a whole muhurta for that.
Yeah, but can I ask something, Barry? Wouldn't you want to schedule surgery for cancer where you're taking something out of the body? Wouldn't you want to schedule something like that on a Krishna Paksha?
Um, Not necessarily. Actually, when we learn the rules for surgery, the moon has a lot to do with the movement of bodily fluids. Um, again, there's so many rules I can't always keep it in my head. But I do remember that surgery is usually done during the waxing moon, but not at the full moon or the new moon. And then there are all these rules that if the moon is transiting the body part that's being operated on, you want to avoid it. So, like, stomach is ruled by Leo, so you wouldn't do a surgery for a stomach surgery if the moon were in Leo. There are all these kind of exotic rules, and they're quite fascinating. But it's something, it's something to be aware of. Yeah. I do get a lot of people worried about surgery, and I'll tell you one of the secrets about surgery in Muhurthas is usually you just have to you have to do them because the body, it needs to happen. Sometimes you have to do them because the doctor can only take you at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday, and sometimes you have emergency surgery and you just have to do them. So what people do get electional surgeries that they worry about, and in reality, sometimes scheduling, getting the doctor's schedule to work with the Muhurtha is a semi-nightmare, but sometimes it can happen. Certainly, when I tell people come to me about surgery selection, it's usually like, well, Mars is really afflicted on this Tuesday, and Mars should be strong for surgery. So if you can wait, let's get Mars stronger in Leo, during these 2 weeks, So that's, there are workarounds like that. But one of the things that we have to learn with Muhurtha is it's so hard to get it perfect. So you end up trying to do the best you can with it. And Tia shared a wonderful story with me before we started, and she said, Tia, I don't know if you want to share that. Maybe why don't you share it? You did a great job with it.
Sure. I told Barry I had done immersives in Muhurtha just by myself, as well as, reading everything he sent and all the other books out there, which are very hard to digest. But I kind of collectively came to a conclusion. The way I looked at Muhurtha was, it's kind of like saying you're going to Disneyland and you got free tickets, but the only day available is a Wednesday. So you go, but you get stuck in traffic, and parking is, double, triple the price. But you still get to Disneyland, and you still manage to have a good time. So the whole purpose was really for me to understand that, you can schedule, have a targeted time for an event, but there could be all of these dependencies, like all the tithis, the nakshatra, just the different parts of time that we're going through that may not align perfectly, but the event can actually happen. It's just, the outcome may be good, the outcome may be bad, but that's kind of how I had to really deconstruct this whole process, because a Muhurtha in general is really trying to find the best angles of light between the sun and the moon for the event to be as optimal as it can be. And there is a 50 to 60% chance of that happening. So within that 50 to 60% chance, what are the variables that we actually do have control over, and what are the variables that we don't? So, a little bit off of the astrology path, but from really doing a lot of deep dives into this, I had to try to make sense of it so I could understand, because I can just tell you, everybody, from YouTube, from the books, from everything, whether it's, Ernst Wilhelm, Camilla, all the YouTubes out there, it is incredibly hard to deconstruct this and kind of put it into a cohesive picture. So I'm very appreciative of Barry doing this 16-week course, because I've been asking for like years.
Okay, thanks, Tahia. And one of the things that I want to share with you, like I said, it's, the point about Tahiya's thing is that, you know, it's hard to get it perfect, but you know, you can get it pretty good. I mean, I did a Muhurtha for my financial business in 1992, and it's a Leo rising with the Sun exalted and Jupiter in Leo, and there's a lot of really good things in it. And 35 years later, my company still exists and it generates revenue. You know, 9 out of 10 businesses fail. So, you know, I knew enough about Muhurtha and astrology to kind of like pick, you know, some good things. And, you know, it's not perfect. You know, it's not like I haven't had bumps in my business, you know, cycles and things like that. But the point is, you know, I'm still here after 35 years, and I you know, people think it's amazing. So, you know, Muhurtha can be used to kind of create something powerful. And, you know, with marriage, it's very important because, you know, 50% of the population gets divorced. And if you've got bad karma for marriage in your chart, you better get a Muhurtha because you want to create a new entity, you want to overcome your karma. So it's very powerful. Okay. Tithis. Tithis. So the problem with tithis are, there are 5, you know, there's 15 of them, and they're connected to the elements. And the ones that are tricky are the water elements, 4, 9, and 14. Those are more emotionally, they feel unsupported. Again, tithis are connected to Venus and to relationship. And so you wouldn't do a marriage on Tithi 4, 9, or 14 because you're immediately creating a problem in the Muhurtha about lack of emotional support. But you know, the Tithis are quite fascinating. Again, I'm just going to show you a few points from each one of these because we'll spend a whole day on each one of these. Karanas are quite fascinating. They're half lunar days, so there's about 6 hours. And they're connected to the base chakra. So again, it's the earthy element, it's grounding in business. And they're about manifesting money and material existence. There are 60 karanas, there's 30 tithis, there's 60 karanas. And the ones that are difficult are the ones connected to Saturn, which are multiples of 8 here. And then the ones connected to Rahu and Ketu around the full and the new moon. So most of them are fine. It's interesting, I had this incredible Muhurtha with a business colleague, and the one thing that was off was the Karana. It was Vishti. And it never happened. It just, we had all these great plans together. It just never happened. And so it's very funny how even like one important element might, especially like the Karna, because it's connected to business, you know, just, you know, if it doesn't work, it could really kind of throw things for a loop. Yeah, people, if you know, we know the Karanas around, this be Karanas. Karanas 5, 59, 60, and 61 are connected to Rahu and Ketu, and that's the new moon energy. And you know those are always difficult times, and people born around new moons just have really difficult lives. Here are all the difficult Karanas. They're called Vishti Karna. They're connected to Saturn and then to Rahu and Ketu. So of the 60 of them, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 1/5 of the Karanas are inauspicious, but that means 80% of them are good. So the chances of getting a good Karna are pretty easy to make happen. But again, it's kind of interesting. The Karanas each have individual names. I think those names are quite fascinating. I'm starting to get into the Vedic names, but they'll throw you for a loop. But they all have personalities, and eventually, it's kind of interesting. We'll spend a whole lesson on Karanas. Okay, then we get the Nitya Yogas, and the Nitya Yogas are, as Tahia was mentioning, this the relationship between the sun and the moon. It's kind of like a scissors. The sun and the moon are together. It's like a clock. The sun and the moon are at the exact same point at a new moon, and then the scissors at the hands of the clock kind of rotate, and certain angles of the sun and the moon are inauspicious. And those are the ones listed here: 1, 6, 9, 10, 15, 17, 19, 27. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 of the 27 Nitya Yogas, if I counted right, are inauspicious. But they're also kind of very interesting for personality, and they also help us with wealth because they're connected to Jupiter. And we'll learn again the technique for calculating the yogi point by hand. The yogi point is a auspicious point in the chart that can bring wealth, particularly if planets transit over it. And I have a client who had Jupiter. He was in a Jupiter period, and he had Jupiter retrograding over his yogi point over a 6 or 8 month period. It was an unusual year, and he made like $11 or $12 million in speculation during that time, and then eventually won another $35 million in a settlement. But it's very funny sometimes. Yogi points sometimes don't mean much unless you have so you're in the right dasha or stuff like that. But we'll learn about yogi points and wealth again, and then they're the Avi yogi points, which are the negative points, and we'll go over that again. We've done that in the wealth courses that I teach. And nakshatras. So I've taught probably 30 maybe 30 weeks on nakshatras, and we can't do nakshatras justice, but we will focus on nakshatras, special rules for nakshatras and Muhurtha, and just remembering, certain nakshatras are just kind of nasty. Bharani, Kritika, Jyeshta, Ardra, Mula. Those are particularly kind of nasty nakshatras for starting new events, and you just can't get away with using them usually, unless you're starting a war or something like that. So good to be kind of aware of those, and we'll go over those in detail. And then something that isn't taught very much anymore, Hora, the daily hour. I think we have a whole lesson on hours. There are hours every day. You can get a program, probably Cosmic Insights, I think, has a program that will tell you you're the ruler of the hour. You get a little obsessed with it. I think it's a little crazy, but sometimes there are better hours of the day than others. If Jupiter's strong in transit, then the Jupiter hour is going to be very strong. I mean, if the Saturn's a problem baby, then you don't want to use the Saturn hour. So we'll learn how to calculate those. And then the problem is there's special times every day to bypass problems. So what happens in Muhurtha is there's always something that's a problem, or somebody has to sign a contract, and there's just too many negatives happening. And so you find there's a 48-minute period every day called Abhijit, that reminds us of Abhijit Nakshatra, which is connected to Lord Brahma. And Lord Brahma grants all our wishes. So what happens is it varies. The Abhijit period varies based on daylight time or standard time, and it's usually around noon, but then it varies because of daylight and standard time, and so and the length of the day. So the computer programs help us calculate that, but basically you get business people, and I have a business client, and they have contracts all the time, and they call me and they say, do you have something tomorrow? And but they have to sign the contract because they're in business. So I find the Abhijit period, and I try to pick a couple days that are better than others, and I do it. And see, there are workarounds, but the Abhijit thing is one of these magic things. I remember one of my first gurus, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, they had to do some important signing or something that was very auspicious, and the Vedic pundits came back to him and said, well, there's no good times, and he said, oh no, just do it at noon. So sun is high in the sun is in the 10th house at noon, usually, and it's just an auspicious time to start things. So that's also partially connected to the Abhijit energy, but it also can vary a little bit. And then there are periods that you want to avoid. Rahu Kalam, which connected to Rahu. And I originally found this in a book on medical astrology, because you don't want to do important medical procedures or, during Rahu Kalam. And it's based on we'll learn the rules around that. If you have a 6 a.m. sunrise, which only happens, March 21st or September 21st or something, then these would be the Rahu Kalam times, and then you adjust them based on daylight savings time and sunrise and things like that. But there are programs that generate this, and you can. I use this in the stock market. I find that the markets often go down during the Rahu Kalam period. I thought that's kind of fascinating. So if you're trying to put on a trade, you sometimes wait. You kind of expect weakness during the Rahu Kalam period, and the Rahu Kalam period ends and the market goes up. I noticed that with Fridays, and again, it varies with sunrise and things like that. But Friday mornings, the stock market's often down, and then usually by 10 o'clock on daylight time, it suddenly comes to life again. So if you're looking to buy, you watch that time period. That I teach that in my trading classes and things like that. Okay.
What about Rahu Kalam? Is that the same thing as Rahu Kal?
Yeah.
And is it just not a good time to do something? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but like I say, you can't live your life, expecting the sky to fall down. But I find that when really weird things happen in my life, they usually happen during Rahu Kal. And yeah, I think I ever had the correct Sanskrit pronunciation. I just call it, but Rahu Kal is probably the correct. Thank you for that. I just find weird things happen during the Rahu Kal times, like when and so I try not to. I try not to. I mean, I've watched timing over the years, and when really weird things happen, it almost always happens during the Rahu Kal time. So the way I use it is, or way you can use it is, okay. So let's say Mars is really afflicted, and you're in a bad afflicted Mars period, and you're worried about accidents, and it's a Tuesday. Well, then, if it's just, being particularly cautious and not driving, or driving carefully if you have to go out between 3 and 4:30 would be what you might watch. And I noticed this. I had this one Tuesday during Rahu Kal, I spilled an urn of scalding hot water on my bare feet, and it was this very serious burn. And it happened during a Saturn K2 transit or something. But it was a Tuesday, and Mars is also afflicted, and so you can't live your life kind of like, I can't go out of the house, it's Rahu Kal. But if you're aware of it, and if there are other factors going on, that then it's a problem. I just find if I have fights with my wife, or if I have difficult interactions with people or something, or something weird happens, and often it's almost always during the Rahu cult period, you know. So I just, it's nice to be aware of it. I can't tell you how many times I've noticed it, but like I said, you can't, at some point you can't live your life like, you know, in a bomb shelter, you know.
And is this sort of like Abhijit, where it's just based on, you know, where you live and it's a specific, you know, timestamp?
Yeah, and
Or
their program, I'll show you the
because you listed specific times, so I didn't know if that was specific to where you live or if that's just the general
this is the general time period for a 6 o'clock sunrise. That's what this is.
Okay, so that's just everywhere.
Yeah, but that's for a 6 o'clock sunrise, which only happens twice a year. But so you have to adjust it a few minutes as sunrise goes later. So you have to look up sunrise. Now the nice thing is there are computer programs like Panchanga, which will tell you exactly what it is that day for your. So you can just look it up every day on the web. If you have to calculate it by hand, I can show you how to do it, which is always nice to learn, but you go to the computer program and just look it up.
Hey, Barry, it's Alice again. On this Panchanga, you know how we in the US change our timing, like Pacific Daylight and Pacific Standard?
Right.
So how is Panchanga affected? Because if we change the time, I mean, that just kind of, it doesn't seem accurate. Or
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem accurate for us because we're like in a different, we change it, right? So I don't know how to.
Yeah, basically the computer programs help us out. I mean, when I first had to learn astrology, you really had to think about those things, you know, when you had to do charts by hand. Now the computer programs calculate it for us. So basically, you don't have to think about it. And I also had this, you know, question come up for S locality, but for the most part, the computer programs calculate it properly for us.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
It helps because I know some, you know, ancient astrologers, I mean, for 3 years you would study with a priest just to do the mathematics of charts, and you had to have a strong K2 to be good with math, so you could create a chart. I mean, now we're all blessed with the K2 computers that allow us to, you know, instantly do things, and all these advanced detailed calculations and Varga charts, and there's, you know, it's amazing what computers can do now, and we never used to be able to do this. I mean, I actually started learning Vedic astrology in 1987, and there's one basic computer program that was just out, but I used to calculate dashas by hand. That's how I learned it, and actually it's how I learned about time. So there's something wonderful about calculating stuff by hand, and I think it's good to know how to calculate it by hand, because I think it goes into your consciousness, and then you feel it. But I think, you know, we're blessed with computers now. You know. Okay, so there's all kinds of advanced things that we'll learn, but we'll also have a lesson on nakshatra tithi yogas, which are very important. There's an important book which came out, which saved my life, called Journey with the Moon. And it's about, there's an incredible amount of knowledge that, you know, I just, in the fact that there are combinations when the day of the week and the tithi and the nakshatra are lining up, and you get these yogas, sometimes siddha yogas or mriti yogas, and they happen a lot, and they also can be overriding factors in helping you find a good muhurtha. In other words, you're in the middle of choosing, and you see you've got an amrita yoga or a siddha yoga, and those are like, you know, real bonus points. Like, some of the important things about muhurtha is, you know, the most important things is getting the moons unafflicted, getting the moon in a good nakshatra, getting having one of these Tithi Nakshatra Dina yogas, these combinations. And now I'm incorporating this work into timing the stock market, because I find that on these days where you get these bad yogas, you know, like we had one Thursday or something like that. Now, Thursday is usually a good day for the stock market. Jupiter's strong, but the stock market was down hard. But there was like a bad yoga between the day of the week and the Tithi and the Nakshatra, and it's called poison. I mean, I think, and I find that those days are just inauspicious. And I think it's nice to note them on your calendar, because it's like, okay, let's not do a job interview when the nakshatra lunar day combination is poisonous. You know, it's like weird things happen, right? So, but you know, all of this is like, Muhurtha is all about getting control. It's not being a victim of the planets. We don't ever want to be a victim of the planets with the transits. We want to have the knowledge to empower us to be a master of the planets, because we're meant to be masters. And becoming a master means having the knowledge and having advanced knowledge. So anyway, I think I'm excited about this course, and I think there are a lot of, I tried to give you a sneak preview of all the little different things that we'll do. And you know, I think one of the things that I'm kind of interested in doing, you know, I think it's even interesting for doing people's charts, is this whole thing, even just really understanding, I think I showed this to you at the beginning. This whole thing is that you can actually see a lot of hidden personality qualities if you understand the Panchanga. And I think I have to go back to this when I do charts. It somehow reveals a lot of hidden things about a person that you just don't see right away. You know, like I said, if you really looked in my chart, you know, like the fact that I have Nitya Yoga 16, you know, explains a lot of my life. I mean, you know, expert in business and multi-skilled. Now, sometimes I take that for granted, but you know, and my yogi point is in Dhanishta, you know, for wealth and stuff like that. But you know, there are little things that you kind of pull out of a Panchanga that you know, sometimes you just don't see anywhere, and they're very revealing. And so that is something you know, is going to go into the course, because all the rules are kind of boring, but I think the personality is kind of interesting. Okay, so this I'm open to questions. This course is going, I'm going on vacation this week on a meditation retreat. This course is going to start Saturday, April 12th with class 2. For when you sign up, I will send you some Panchanga books, and I'm going to suggest that you buy one of the Western calendars if you don't have it. And I'm going to suggest that even while I'm gone, that you start working on looking at all the transits for the year, and looking at all the major planetary things. And then we can talk about them, because I think it's important to you know, for planning, like I said, planning your year, you know, okay, you know, the astrology is decent at the end of June and the first week of July, and let's see what we can fit in when we have to do important things. And like, let's tell people not to travel with Mars conjunct Ketu and riding happening in July. You know, it's you know, it's important to kind of have a sense of it all. And I think one of the things that I've mastered because of transits is because I've been doing these yearly calendars, and it's just very revealing for kind of taking control of your life. So there's a lot of practical things in this course, as you can see. It's not just about scheduling a new business or something. I think it's really about understanding daily timing and influences in your life. So it's an exciting class. So if you're interested in the class, you'll receive a copy of GoToWebinar sends you a link for the replay of the videotape. For those of you who missed the videotape because you didn't come to the live class, you'll also get a link to play the videotape, and then it tells you it gives you a link for signing up for the course. It's on my website at appliedvedicastrology.com under the course is $395, which is fairly inexpensive. It ends up being 16 classes, so it's like about $25 a class or something like that, which is fairly cheap. And no one's teaching this stuff. And when I have to take classes, sometimes like they're $1,000 or $1,800. I've taken classes like that. So, my classes are very reasonable. I hope your credit cards will do payment plans for you, but if they don't, I mean, I can have PayPal set up payments. It's nicer, and the regular price of the course is $495. If you sign up before the course, I think within 3 or 4 days, then you get the $100 discount of $395. And like I said, once you sign up for the course, I will send you the Panchangas and and you start doing the calendars and stuff like that. So I'm here to take questions. I'm excited, and if you need a special PayPal invoice, you can email me. I think we've had 4 people registered already in the class, and it's going to happen for sure. I just wanted to say. So let me open up for questions again. If you, I'll try to. Oh, by the way, Afi, could you share your experience with me as a teacher for people who aren't familiar with?
Yes, hi Barry. Good morning, everyone. Barry, I've been taking classes with Barry for, I think, 8 years, 9 years, something like that. Barry is extremely knowledgeable in the area of Vedic astrology and spirituality. And his teaching method is just, he's a very kind, giving individual and teacher, and very nurturing. So, which helps with your learning ability and whether or not, you can learn a subject matter. He's extremely supportive and gets you involved. And I highly recommend. I mean, I've been with Barry for, like I said, 8, 9 years, and I really like his classes and teaching method.
Thank you, Afi. Anybody else who's taken classes with me want to share anything? I think, or any questions on anything?
Hi, Barry. I'll share.
Great.
I want to say I really appreciate Barry's knowledge. Even some of the Indian astrologers ask him. He's been on, you were on that, I can't remember his name. I used to,
Dr. Pai's channel.
Yeah, and there's another one who's really funny, but I can't remember his name as well.
Right, Kapil's channel, yeah.
Yeah, that's him. And I find that very impressive because they appreciate, his mastery of this topic, and there's a lot to learn. I would just say I'm more basic, but at the same time I'm learning a lot, even just listening, and it feeds my consciousness so that I can be aware of these different parts of Vedic astrology that Barry shares that you don't get anywhere else. And he's very generous in his teaching. So I just want to say thank you also. So
Thank you, Alice. Yeah, one of the things I like to teach boutique classes. So I've only taught basic Vedic astrology once. For those of you who want to learn basic astrology from me, and it's really kind of advanced basic astrology the way I teach it, I have classes online. I'm to buy. I call them canned classes on my website, appliedvedicastrology.com, under courses, and it's the foundation courses. So if you have no background in Vedic astrology and want to start from the beginning, you can pick those up. But I have, I call them boutique classes. They're specialized courses on dashas or transits or medical astrology or career and income. We just finished one, Secrets of the Sun, Secrets of the Moon. I like doing, I'm very creative with my classes. So this is kind of a traditional class because it's really one of these core classes that everybody should learn when they study Vedic astrology, but it's not happening enough. So it was always the first thing that you learned when in ancient India. I mean, this is where you started. So let's call this the most basic course. Seriously, this is it. Okay, any questions? I'll try to look in chat and see if there's something. Sometimes I did unmute everybody. Sometimes it's hard to use the controls here. I don't see any questions in chat. Yeah. If you see the chat thing area, you can type a question, and I'm not seeing anything at the moment. But okay, so any final questions or thoughts? So again, please join me starting April 12th for the second class. And again, register early and you get your free Panchangas and your assignments to start charting the astrology for the year. And if you're not on my newsletter list, I have a free bi-weekly newsletter talking about the transits, and occasionally I put up videos. I have about 60 videos on YouTube of which are often classes like this, or which are introducing my courses. And I'm here for readings and things like that too. So anyways, good having you all today, and look forward to working with you in the future. Again, you can email me questions at barry2@appliedvedicastrology.com and visit my website. And hopefully, if hopefully you learned something from today's lesson. Okay, so final thoughts.
Thank you, Barry. It was lovely. It was wonderful.
Okay, good, Joy.
Thank you, Barry.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Barry.
Okay, great. I'll see you guys soon. I guess I will officially end. Take care.